Hello, children. Welcome back. New day, new beginning. I hope you all are taking proper precautions to keep yourself safe and fit. Let us begin with the thought for the day. Courage is knowing what not to fear. With a good thought, we are going to begin with the interesting lesson. That is lesson number 13, The Adventures of Gulliver. I know you all like to read a lot. You must be getting inspired by the people who are brave and courageous. Let us read about such person. That person is Gulliver. Though the stories are fictional, though the character of Gulliver is imaginary, but while reading the lesson, it appears as if these things must have happened in real life. That is the skill of the writer. And the author of Gulliver's Travel is Jonathan Swift, born in Ireland, and is best known for the work Gulliver's Travel. Now, the word Gulliver, it's having dictionary meaning. That is, a fictional Englishman who travels to the imaginary land of Lilliput in a novel, and that novel is written by Jonathan Swift. And this lesson, Adventures of Gulliver, is a part or it is extract. It's not a complete story. This is the part of the story. When you will come back to the school, please approach the library and you can take the book Gulliver's Travel and you can read the complete story. So our lesson is an extract from the book Gulliver's Travels. As I told you, though it's imaginary account about Gulliver. Gulliver worked as a surgeon on ships, and this part will describe the experience of Gulliver at a place like Lilliput. What happened to his ship? How he reached there? Let us read that. So please be ready with your textbook, Adventures of Gulliver. Gulliver's Travels is an interesting book written by a well known English writer, Jonathan Swift, in which he describes the voyages of Gulliver to various lands like Lilliput and Brobdingnag. Though the character of Gulliver and their strange sounding lands are imaginary, Gulliver's experiences and adventures are written so well that they seem real and true to life. It seems as if these incidents must have surely occurred. Gulliver, the story tells us, worked as surgeon on ships. As such, he made several voyages. Voyages are long journeys by seas and they take a long time. These voyages take a long time because in those days, water route was the only means of transport and waterways take a long time. In May 1699, he sailed on the ship the Antelope. On the return journey in November, a violent storm sank his ship and Gulliver swam to save his life. Late in the evening, he found himself marooned on a strange land. Marooned, he was left alone ashore. Weak and exhausted. Of course, he was weak because he swam for several hours to save his life. He was so exhausted that he slept for about 9 hours and it was daylight when he awake. Let us read what happened next in his own words. Gulliver meets the Lilliputians. All are ready with textbook? Right. I tried to get up from the ground, but I could not move. I was lying on my back. Then I found that my arms and feet were held down to the ground with strings. My hair, which was long, was held down in the same way. Thousands of strings had been passed across my body so that I could not move any part of me, but could only lie there on my back looking up at the sky. So the land where he had reached was the land of Lilliputians. These were all people with very short stature, or they were barely half a foot in height, that is 6 inches. For them, Gulliver seemed to be a giant, and when they discovered that a giant is sleeping on the shore, what precautions they could have taken? They thought of tying him down so that this giant would not harm them. Imagine a man of 15 to 20 feet height is found in our city, will be we might be also afraid in the same way as Lilliputs were afraid of Gulliver. So when he opened his eye, when he was awake, he discovered that his arms, his legs, everything was tied down with the help of thousands of strings, and the strings were passed over his body in such a way that it was not possible for him to move. His hair were long, and they were also tied with the help of strings, as you can see in the picture. In a little time, I felt something alive moving on my foot. Then it came over my body and up to my face. Turning my eyes down as much as I could, I saw a man. He was not half a foot high. By his dress, he seemed to be a soldier. Then there came 40 more, following the first. He felt something was moving alive, something was moving on his feet, and when the thing came near him, he was not able to move. He just turned his eyes down as much as he could, and he saw a man. It seemed as if he was a soldier, hardly 6 inches tall, and then came many more. He was so surprised. He has never seen in his life these small people. He shouted, he cried loudly, he gave a great cry. And for the Lilliputians, the giant, like Gulliver, shouting very loudly, poor creatures, they were all afraid. They ran here and there to save their life. Even some were injured. I was so surprised that I gave a great cry. Then they all ran back in great fear. And as I was told later, some of them were hurt in jumping down from my side onto the ground. So they were moving on his body, and when he shouted loudly, they were afraid and they tried to save their life. And later on, when Gulliver became friends with Lilliputs, they told him that some of them, some of the poor Lilliputians were even injured. Why? Because they had to jump down from his body to the ground. It is like jumping from the first or second floor for us. Next page. Gulliver attempts to pull free. After pulling very hard, I got one arm up from the ground. I also raised my head. This gave me great pain, for many of the hairs were pulled out. Of course, if your hair are pulled out, it's very painful. I put out my hands to catch some of the little men, but they ran away before I could close my hand on them. Then I heard a noise and felt a pricking in my hand like that of thousand needles. I found that they were shooting arrows at me. I was afraid for my eyes. I put my hand over my face. After this, I thought that the wisest thing to do was to lie quiet till night. I thought that then, my hand being free, I could quickly set free the rest of my body. So with great efforts, he could free one of his hand. With great efforts, he could raise his hand. Of course, that was painful because many of his hair just were pulled out. And he tried to catch hold of some of them. But before he could catch them, they all ran away. And then, in the in a way to save their life, they started shooting arrows to him, as they were very afraid for their life. And small people with small arrows, the arrows were just like small needles. But even that was hurting Gulliver, and he was afraid that the needles or the arrows of the Lilliputians might injure his eyes, so he decided to just lie down quietly for some time, and at night he would try to save himself. Soon a platform was raised, and an important looking man gave a long speech. From his gestures, I guessed that he was trying to tell me that they would not harm me. If I did as they told, I too replied with gestures that I would remain quiet. I also told them that I was hungry. Exhausted, Gulliver was exhausted, he was hungry, and then he realized that a platform is raised and important looking man, maybe minister or somebody very important officer of the kingdom had come to talk to him. Whatever he spoke, Gulliver did not understand the language, but his expression with hands and arms made Gulliver realize that he was telling that Lilliputians will not harm him. Gulliver also replied back. He said that he won't harm them and he was very hungry. So the small people to the ground. Remaining part of the lesson we will read and I will explain in part 2 of the presentation.